All right, everyone. My name is Jay Lanfear, Clover Park Technical College. My colleague, Jody Randall, is joining me this evening. We have, again, glad to be here, the CPTC Security Burrito. We have a special guest, Brian. We have another special guest, Ray, and both graduates of Clover Park, by the way, and then Rob. And Rob really doesn't need an introduction. He's been here before. He's traveled these digital streets in our podcast. This is really the first video podcast that we're doing. So it's good to see everyone's faces. With our special guest, Ray, they're going to do some collaboration with Brian and discuss some pretty interesting topics, in my opinion. Rob and all of us, we were talking behind the scenes, so they have a topic that they would like to discuss, and this is definitely that platform for us to discuss that. So what I'm going to do is hand it over to Rob. We're just going to have a casual conversation between all of us. And Rob? So
awesome. So as Jay said, my name is Rob. I am a pen tester, red team operator, and general offensive security person. Ray, would you like to introduce yourself, followed by Brian?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Ray. I am a senior security consultant and project manager. I've got 7 or 8 years experience. And yes, I graduated from Clover Park.
Yep. And my name is Brian Halbach. Also all around security professional, doing pen testing, red teaming, physical pen testing as well. And yeah, I've been doing that for, it feels like forever. But yeah, since since 2015 when I graduated college myself.
Yeah, awesome. Glad to have you here, Brian.
Brian,
so Brian yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask Brian probably the same thing that you were going to ask him. Why did you get into this field? What was so intriguing and exciting? What's the backstory behind that?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I'd always been interested in security, but originally my professional goals were actually to be a network architect. I wanted to build data centers. That's actually where I originally saw myself going. And then I kind of got into the security field, and I was getting so frustrated with customers and clients at the time that I actually pivoted into pen testing, because essentially I had several customers who kept saying, well, we have antivirus and we have a firewall. Why would I ever pay more for security? Because I have everything I need. Yeah. And so at one point I essentially had a client who was like, well, we don't need anything else. And I was like, no, I can prove that you still have gaps in your security. And they're like, okay, prove it. So about 3 hours later, I was able to get an interpreter past their antivirus, past their firewall. And all of a sudden the lights go on, like, oh, yeah, maybe we do need some more than just antivirus and a firewall. Maybe there is more to this security thing. But yeah, that's kind of how I started professionally getting into the field. But I mean, otherwise I'd always just loved the whole, I guess, playing around with computers in general. And when I was in 8th grade, I ended up teaching myself Python programming. And that was the same year that I got kicked off the computers, because I figured out how to put a pop-up on everybody's computer that just said hello. But apparently that's still frowned upon. So I was labeled the school computer hacker at that point.
Is that a bad thing? I don't think so.
I don't think so, no.
So that's very interesting. In fact, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile here. Yeah, you do have some history. University of Wisconsin.
Oh yeah, University of Wisconsin Stout. So it was a smaller school up in the northwestern area of the state. But yeah, they were known for, essentially, they were a sysadmin factory. We just pumped out sysadmins most of the time. And it was after I graduated is when they actually had a larger focus on security. So now they actually have a much more complete program around security. Where at the time when I went there, yes, they had plenty of classes on it and some focus on it, but not the same level of focus that they have today.
Nice.
That's a polytechnical school, right?
Yeah. So everything was hands-on. Yeah, UW Stout is a polytechnic university, so we got the theoretical plus the hands-on, which really really helps out a lot.
So, do you live in the local area?
I live in the Minneapolis area, which is only an hour away from where I went to school.
Okay. Okay. Well, I appreciate the difference in time zone and making arrangements to join us this evening.
No problem.
That's a little late
Thank
back
you,
there.
Brian.
Yeah.
So, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hand it over to Rob and just kind of have you guys start a conversation. We're going to sit back and listen. I'm very excited to hear your story.
Well, thank you. So, Brian, you've been on ABC News. You've been on other podcasts. I think Darknet Diaries, and you've been on Nightline, ABC News, and those Darknet Diaries surrounding one type of security, which is physical security, like physical penetration testing. While you do other stuff, you're well known for your physical penetration testing skills. Just wanted to talk about how you got into that and why, and then have a bunch of follow-on questions after that.
Yeah. I feel like I'd always enjoyed going around and kind of doing the urban exploration side of things. So not necessarily at that point picking locks or anything, but kind of just going and exploring different areas. And then it wasn't until I moved out here to Minneapolis that I happened to meet the right group of people who sat down at a conference and taught me lock picking. And then I got bit by the bug, and I'm like, oh my God, this actually I have it right here with me. These are the little fidget toys I have on my desk. This is a fun one on camera. This is actually a cutaway lockout tap out lock. So you can actually see what you're doing. And yeah, it all started with these locks, and actually having one of those locks pop in your hand when you're doing the lock picking is a very addictive feeling. And I just happened to know some people that were working at a company called Red Team Security at the time. And yeah, taught me some more skills. And then eventually they were looking for somebody to fill a position. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm already good at this pen testing stuff. I do security assessments, and I've been doing more of the blue team side work. I'd been doing, I was essentially a network security admin, doing firewalls, proxies, IDS, IPS, all the network side of the security stuff for a while. So I had a good foundational set of knowledge of how that all worked. And it kind of just all fell together at this nice time where I had enough physical security knowledge to get myself going. I had people that I was able to connect to and kind of hit the ground running with this job. And then they took me under their wing, and I believe it was the second day of my job, they gave me a set of bypass tools, and then took my key away to the office, and then kind of just could see if I could get my way into the office. And I did. So.
Awesome. So when people think information security, they think firewalls, they think EDRs, they think, security groups and Active Directory, network products, web application firewalls. How does physical security tie into information security for you?
Yeah, well, it's kind of one of those things where oftentimes a company will have all those tools that you just mentioned. They'll have them configured and tuned, and everything is just right. But there's this kind of assumed trust model that when you are inside the building, when you actually plug in an Ethernet cable into an open port that you are now trusted. Yes, there's going to be some level of security, but it is a lot easier to just walk into a building or social engineer your way in, or even use a simple bypass tool to get in and leave a small Raspberry Pi device or a small handheld sized mini computer plugged in than it is to create a multi-week phishing campaign followed by a multi-week reconnaissance campaign to figure out what security tools they're using, and then followed that up with a 1 week spear phishing campaign with the latest EDR bypasses and sandbox bypasses. Yeah, that is a 6-week effort to get initial access into an organization sometimes, when if you don't have good physical security, I can replicate that same amount of effort in 6 hours.
Say what?
So
Or
yeah,
less.
or 6 hours or less. Absolutely. We've run into that plenty of times where, oops, you forgot to lock the door. And then once you're inside, yeah, you have this hardened exterior, this hardened fortress castle on the outside, and on the inside is the nice juicy center with only the minimal amount of security needed to make things, pass a compliance test, and that's it.
Yeah, definitely see that. And the next thing I'm going to ask you is, I'm going to ask Ray first, because Ray has a different perspective on this than you and I. You and I see eye to eye on the next question, but people often confuse on-site social engineering with physical penetration testing, right? They use those terms interchangeably, right? I'm going to go on site and social engineer, all right, or I'm going to go on site to do a physical penetration test. What's the difference to you, Ray, between an on-site social engineering engagement than an on-site physical penetration test?
So I'm coming to Ray's defense.
Well, I think that there's two things to really keep in mind here. Social engineering is almost always about testing the way a user or a person responds to something. Whereas during physical penetration testing, we don't necessarily want to be interacting with people much, if at all. And in fact, in many of my physical tests, if I have the chance to interact with someone, it's probably in an area or a manner in which I'm already suspicious. And one of the best things to do is to just shut it down rather than social engineer my way through it. But that said, social engineering can be an excellent precursor to a physical attack. And I've used it many, many times myself. Talking your way into a building so that you can watch the manager enter the keypad pin on the door while they walk you into their office to chat with you about whatever you wanted to chat with them about. Things like that. And those are useful tools, but at the same time, at that point in time, you're focused on the social engineering, the person behind it. I'm not going to try and go rogue, walk off, and get myself caught. I'm going to stick to the person, stick to the goal, and then get out when I have the opportunity. And in general, I don't want to mix the two directly.
That is the good answer. That is a very good answer, Ray. Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's very well put. And then there have been several times where I would use social engineering to kind of also get a feel for what is possible for a more physical pen test. So come up with some sort of pretext. Hey, I like to apply for a job. That way you get to see the inside of the building. You get to see which doors are weak, which entrances, exits are monitored, which aren't monitored. So yeah, oftentimes social engineering, as Ray said, can be a good precursor to the actual physical test itself.
I will say, normally I would agree with you, but I have been burned by that.
There's a risk. Yeah, every time you show
tell.
your face, you're taking a risk. So you're right on that.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you go in to do a recon mission, right? Or reconnaissance on the building through social engineering. Security sees your face, or sometimes you sign in at the desk. And then the next thing you know, a security guard sees you on the camera later that night or whatever. And hey, that the guy that signed in earlier to see this, right? Because the shifts overlap. I don't know if it's because I have such a beautiful face that people can't forget it very easily or what. But yeah, that has bitten me and burned me in the past. So I typically, if I want to do that, I will make somebody else do it. And the other thing too is that is then if the more times you go on site and the longer you spend on site, the more time the operation has to go, take a hard left instead of going straight. So that's just something I think that too.
In general, I think with anything on site, anything where you're doing offensive security testing that might interact with people who don't know what you're doing, there's always going to be risk involved, whether it's social engineering
100%.
or physical testing. And you want to minimize the amount of time with risk exposure as much as possible.
Yeah, we don't want to go to the hospital with 2 broken ankles, right, Brian?
Yeah, that'd be a crazy time. But yeah, also I'd sent people in costumes before, so sent a guy. Oh, this beard that I have right now was dyed gray and then dyed my hair gray, but it was one of those washout dyes. So yeah, I was able to go and do on-site reconnaissance and then wash out all the gray. I was also wearing a completely different type of outfit, and my coworker went in a fat suit, and then, which like up close it looked not very convincing, so he had to try to stay away from people. But that way, if they saw him on camera, they wouldn't be able to kind of correlate the two, because on camera he was wearing a fat suit, and then in person, when he actually did the physical test, he looked a lot different.
Yeah. The other thing too is identifying marks. I have tattoos on my arms, which is identifying. So I always try to go in during reconnaissance long sleeve shirts, but that's just that too.
So one of the questions that I had is the very same that you've stated. Trying to minimize your time on target is optimal then.
Absolutely. So Brian, why don't you walk through one of your most recent methodologies of doing a pen test, and then Ray, I'll have you walk through your methodology as well.
Pray tell, we're getting to the juicy stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess for physical we're talking methodology for physical pen tests.
Yep.
So yeah, generally it's going to have to start out with some form of OSINT, going online and just collecting as much information on the target as you can, looking for extra things such as job postings, which can give you insights into shifts, when people are there, when they aren't there. Checking Google Earth is a great source for getting information, but it can be old and outdated. So checking some other sources besides just Google Earth. If it is like a skyscraper or a larger building, oftentimes you can check the county laws, and those plans may be available online. In fact, there is a website that its name is currently slipping my mind that actually has photos of a majority of all of the large office buildings in most metropolitan areas that you can go up and view. It was actually mentioned in the book, A Burglar's Guide to the City, which is a really fun read that talks about kind of a burglar's guide to the city and how architecture in general can be used against a building for attacks, and how that's actually happened multiple times. So yeah, I try to incorporate all that in some OSINT, some open source information gathering, followed by some sort of in-person reconnaissance. So actually getting an up-close view and saying, oh, hey, that photo from Google Earth, it's close, but it's a little outdated. There's actually a new building behind it that could raise suspicion. And then, yeah, going on site and actually seeing for yourself what is there, and then creating some sort of operational plan. So I'm trying to remember the quote by Winston Churchill where he says, to paraphrase it, it's the act of planning is indispensable, but the plan itself usually goes right out the window as soon as you start operating and doing something. But yeah, having some sort of operational plan, creating emergency infiltration and exfiltration spots in case of an emergency, so that the team that you're with knows what to do if something hits you out of left field. Making sure that you know what odd things to look for. Like when I'm doing on-site reconnaissance, I'm going to be looking, all right, is this close to a police station, so that if they do call the police, there's going to be a rapid response, or is this on the other side of town? And we know that even if we sound off an alarm, we have half an hour to an hour before any sort of response gets here. And then, yeah, creating that operational plan, plan A, plan B, plan C, and then, yeah, finally just triggering that mobilization and going in and actually doing the operation. And yep, generally the first 3 steps of the operation go as planned, and then everything after that, you should have an idea of what to be expecting and how to handle different situations. But oftentimes you have to just figure it out on the fly, because once you're inside the building or inside of that target, there's going to be a lot of unknown variables that you just could not collect during OSINT or reconnaissance that you have to deal with and handle. And then, yeah, generally having some sort of bug out time. So, at X time, no matter what, we're getting out of the building. Or depending on the needs of the clients, there's been a case where they're like, oh yeah, we should have response time. So as soon as I'd enter the building, I'd set off a timer and see how long it actually it would be until somebody actually properly responded, which in one case they never did, even though alarms and pager duty alerts and multiple things were going out. Nobody actually did anything. Where in another case, we set off an alarm sensor and there was a proper response in the 45-minute time window that they were supposed to. And so that was actually something I was supposed to be testing for the actual test and putting into the report. So, but yeah, and then that's the most important part, is collecting all the information while you're doing this, which can actually be tricky sometimes. So having something like a GoPro, a good camera on you, so that you can document everything, every step of the way, and being cognizant of everything that you're seeing and observing. And there are times where I'm approaching a door and we've already gotten through it, and then I go back out again because it actually has more than one weakness. There was one instance where John and I, the individual who was on Darknet Diaries and the TV special with me, we went through a fence already, and then we realized, hey, wait a second, we actually have the key to the door access control box for this fence that allows it to open and close. So we've already broken in, then we go back out and we use our key, we break in again, because this is a pen test. We need to give this person as much information as possible on how to fix every single issue. So we did waste an extra 20 minutes maybe, but at the end of the day, we gave them a better report, and we still didn't get caught.
I don't like
that's the important thing, is getting the client as much information as possible is really the whole goal of this. Yeah.
I want to say that was a waste, because I don't think that was a waste of time.
Yeah, you're right.
So, Brian, have you ever done any research or know anything about the Watergate break-ins?
Surprisingly, I have not. I know just enough to know about it, and I believe I watched the Drunken History episode where they did a celebrity recreation of it, but that's kind of where my knowledge on it ends.
It's ironic that pen testing in physical security kind of, in my opinion, Sneakers, the movie Sneakers, was a big kind of jumpstart that kind of inspired a lot of people. And then the exact opposite of that, the Watergate break-ins, it's the exact opposite of what you just described. So it took them 4, maybe 5 attempts, taping door locks. The security guard would come by and they'd pull the tape off the lock. Oh gosh, we need better tools. And they would come back over and over and over again. And the only reason why I bring it up is because your description of the diagramming of a building from Google Earth, they use maps to plan that out. They had exit points, I guess rally points in case something went wrong. They could split up and then, meet in a certain area. So it's interesting where they were not successful, but obviously you are with practice.
Mm-hmm.
Ray, what about your methodology?
So I think our methodologies are overall pretty similar, but there's a few things that I kind of want to call out in the beginning that I like to do. And first off, I think the biggest step that I always do is talk with the client first and go over what their expectations actually are, because I find that people asking for a physical pen test, just like people asking for a network pen test, don't always know what they're asking for and what it is they want. One of the big questions that I always ask right off the bat is, are staff, security staff or otherwise armed? That's a big one and a really big deal to me. And I just want to carry that forward because one of the first things that I do when we actually get on site and begin the reconnaissance phase, which otherwise looks very similar to what Brian described, is I validate everything that the client told me as soon as possible as part of the earliest part of the engagement. If they told me how many security guards are available, I validate that they knew the correct number, shift times, are guards actually armed, things like that. Because anything that you can spot as being a discrepancy usually can be a clue that maybe there's more things that might not be correct. And there's always risks associated with that. I like to go in knowing as many possible things as I can. I'll also add in that during one of the early stages, before I get to the proper breach, but after recon, I like to do social engineering as part of the precursor. And that's usually something that I do in first. Whether it be scheduling a job interview on site, if there is such an opportunity available, or showing up with a misplaced Uber Eats delivery, or whatever it may be, showing up on site and just getting a look inside the building, even if all you get into is the front lobby and talk to someone for a chance to the bathroom, can tell you a lot just to get a good proper inside peek and then leave. And ideally, since I recommend all of these physical tests be done with multiple people on site, you use someone who's not going to go and do the actual breach later. For the same reason Brian mentioned earlier, which is you don't want to necessarily have too many faces shown off early on during the social engineering and reuse them during the breach itself. But one of the other things that I like is I actually typically end up doing two sort of breach phases and usually end up breaching at night. The first time I usually get up close next to the building if I have the opportunity, and I start scouting my points of entry physically, and then I leave. Especially if I can be aware that there's no cameras or lights and that my likelihood of being caught is low, I can tell a lot about alarm systems, get a peek inside windows, things like that I might not necessarily be able to do from a distance. And I found that that can radically change my plans once I get to something. I'd rather risk a second visit, a very brief one, than not necessarily going with a good plan. Because yes, plans always backfire, but the more I have written down beforehand, the better it tends to go.
I agree. I plan for everything except for alien abduction. When we go in, I always ask, hey, what happens if this happens? What happens? What do you do if this happens? What happens if we get approached by a guard, by an employee? I always have this long list of stuff that everyone knows we go through to make sure that it's good. So now we talked about how to be successful. I think all of us have been a part of some pretty catastrophic failures on physical penetration tests, right? I'll share mine first. A coworker and I were doing a physical penetration test, and this coworker of mine was, and still is, pretty popular in this industry, right? Pretty famous on Twitter, all over podcasts, and we broke into this building during working hours. So the client requested. We walked by the knock. Someone pokes their head out and calls them by the name. And what are you doing here? Oh, you must be doing a pen test. Like, how do you know what? Oh, I follow you on Twitter. And that kind of ruined the physical penetration test for us. Right? It was this person's fame worked against them in this instance because the wrong person was paying attention and recognized them from Twitter and social media. So that was, I think, one of the ones. And then shortly after that, we had to sit down with their head of security and explain why we had a catastrophic failure. Yeah, so that was interesting because normally they wouldn't stop anyone, but because they knew what this person did for a living, right? You know, and was what we call infosec famous, right, Brian? You know, they were infosec famous, and that's what tipped the hat in that instance. So it was kind of funny. And then they took pictures of us and posted it in all their security offices nationwide. And that was fun. Yeah. So, Ray, do you want to go next? Talk about catastrophic failure.
What about that car going through the parking lot by itself?
Oh, I totally forgot about that.
Okay,
that
I did
was
not.
a good
On
one.
the phone with you. You'll never believe what I'm looking at. Go ahead.
Yeah. The other time I was doing a physical and I had this rental car. I think, Ray, you remember this one very vividly. I had this rental car parked out there and we're getting ready to breach and towards the end of the day. And I look out the window because I'm already inside the building now. And I just see a truck with no one in it just start backing out and going straight towards my rental car. And I'm like, what's going on? And the truck pulls my rental car with nobody in it. I had to go out of the building, deal with security and the police. I totally forgot about that. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. And that kind of ruined the physical because, hey, I just had to deal with the physical security guy, the facilities guy, the police. And it turns out that this older gentleman parked his truck on a hill without putting the e-brake on. And he got out and slowly started rolling down the parking lot hill and totaled my rental car. And in return, totaled my physical. Yeah, you can't plan for that one. No matter what you do, there's no planning for that one.
I don't think I ever heard that one.
Yeah, that was old. That was in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania.
2015 or 16.
Yeah, that was horrible. I didn't know what to do. I called Jay up and was like, you would not believe what just happened.
I'm like, what? No, come on. And there's a little bit of a time zone difference. So I'm chilling out on the couch. And wasn't that in the wintertime where it was snowing?
No, not there. It was late fall.
Okay. Yeah.
So
right.
It was cold, but
yeah. Anyway, Ray.
So actually, I have a really, really topical one that I think actually harkens back to earlier comments made about social engineering and physicals mixing. One of my first physicals that I got the chance to do on site. Very excited. We had, I think there were 5 or 6 of us all on site. Bunch of locations in a small city out in the middle of the Midwest. Lot of different targets, financial institutions. And we ended up sort of setting up a process by which we had different breach strategies for each one and different information gathering and recon strategies for each one. And this particular building had very limited outside visibility because of its location. We couldn't get up and actually get a good look at it without getting real close to it. So instead, I got the opportunity to go inside. And I basically went in, I asked to talk to someone who could talk me through the process of opening an account and went through all of that. I got to peek a PIN number over someone's shoulder and take a few pictures of the stuff on the manager's desk and dig around in an office drawer for a minute. Things like that.
That's dirty.
Everything was going really well. And then we taped the door on the way out. Smooth, got away, no problem. Couple hours later, we get a phone call. Turns out that I hadn't been caught at the time. No one was suspicious while I was there. But a little bit later, one of the tellers saw the tape on the maglock and knew exactly what that was and what it was for. Reviewed camera footage, got me caught, burned that building. And it's just another example, when you go in, especially if you're going to make yourself obvious by talking to people and interacting with people, you're going to stand out when the security cameras come around and you're the only one there. And that one definitely got us in a little bit of trouble as well. Don't mix social engineering and physicals unnecessarily. Keep the tasks separate.
Yeah, I actually had a similar story at a financial institution where I had something go wrong. I'll have to give the abridged version of this because the full story is, I don't know, about an hour long. But I had a client that was financial institutions. We were supposed to be testing bank locations, but they put some weird restraints on it. And if you work in the industry long enough, you kind of recognize certain questions where, yes, they want a pen test, but they want to look good. They want to pass this. They don't want things to go wrong. So we are supposed to be physically testing these bank branches, but we could only do social engineering. We couldn't use physical tools. So I couldn't bring any bypass tools. I couldn't even clone an RFID badge if I got close enough to an employee. And they said, you cannot do reconnaissance ahead of time. We're not gonna pay for those hours. You're just gonna have to show up and do reconnaissance. So I was already very upset about this test because I'm like, this isn't how it works in the real world. And I didn't really think that we were going to get anything. But yeah, the first bank that we go into, I go in, I do the recon, take photos, I go back out. I brief my coworker in the car in the parking lot, and I said, hey, so all banks pretty much throughout the United States are actually supposed to have similar architectural features that are supposed to make it more safe. So essentially, as soon as you walk into a bank, you are supposed to be within the line of sight of a teller immediately the second you walk through a door. This bank was actually a remodeled office building, and it did not have that line of sight that actually needed. I just told my coworker, hey, just stick to the left side of the building and go to the elevator and just go up a floor and see what you find. And he went to the left side of the building. He was out of the line of sight, went up the elevator, and sure enough, it was a jackpot. We found all of the mortgage documents, tons of PII, just lying around behind doors that did not have locks installed on. They didn't even have door handles installed on them. So we called the client from in there and was like, hey, I have everything right now. This is our first bank branch. Can I take the data with me just to see if the employees catch me on the way out? They said no. So he just like grabbed an empty bag and walked out with an empty bag just to see, is somebody going to stop me? Because that would be something important to have in the report. So yeah, we ended up actually getting kind of everything right away. We had 10 more branches to test. So we slowly start getting more bold throughout the next 2 weeks of testing, to the point that on our last location, I was definitely getting a little too cocky at this point. And we'd already gotten into multiple other locations. And in fact, at one point, we figured out their method. We figured out the bank's methodology for verifying and proving that a visitor should be there. And we found a weakness in it. And we were actually able to, I talked my way into a bank vault doing that. I won't go into details on that because that probably shouldn't be disclosed publicly. But yeah, at the last bank location, I said, okay, here's the plan. I'm going to go in and I'm going to go up to the teller desk and I'm going to go on about a conspiracy theory that I believe that whenever I put my money into the banks, they're sending it off to China to fund something crazy. This was also right around this was during the pandemic. And when I'm going off on my conspiracy theory, then my coworker, his job was supposed to come in and just walk right up and start taking things. So this had actually already worked at one location, but eventually got us caught. My coworker, ended up taking some swag, some notebooks, some pens and stuff like that. And we're like, okay, we got one last branch location. Let's do the same thing one last time. So I go in, I'm going on my conspiracy theory. He goes in, they actually stop him. They're paying a lot of attention to him at this place. And now I'm getting too much attention. And in fact, they pull me aside and like, oh, no, like we're everything you say, it's kind of true, like the way banks work in the back end, there is a possibility that some of your money could go through the banking system to repay debts to China. That is a possibility. I'm like, okay, can you show me this? And they're eventually showing me a PowerPoint presentation that says, internal use only. So I'm like, oh, this is great. But while I'm in this back office where they're showing me this, all of a sudden I see a police officer pull up and get out of his car and walk in. I'm like, okay, the jig's up. So yeah, sure enough, the police officer was there for me. They just said some things about my story didn't add up, and that they, it didn't check out. So they called the police to see what was going on. At which point, when we're doing all these tests, we have a letter of authorization that has sign off to do all this. We refer to it sometimes as the get out of jail free letter. So last location, it's a Friday. I was like, you know what? I got enough already. I'm just going to pull out my authorization letter and show them that this was part of a test and just drop the pretense and not try to talk my way out of getting in trouble with the police. That ended up being a bad idea. I pull out the authorization letter and I go, actually, I'm authorized to do this. This is actually part of a pen test. And then the manager of the bank grabs it out of my hand and goes, what? If this was a test, I would know about it. And like literally yelling at me. And I'm like, no, you were being tested. You were part of the test. And I'm trying to convince the police of this also. And so they take the letter, and the letter not only has like my name, my title, company, and all the important stuff, but also the vice president of the department that authorized the test. So they give that person a call on their work number, no answer. There's a cell phone number, give the cell phone number a call, no answer. They're a little suspicious. They go down to the next one. It's the next person down the line, the whatever, vice president. Call their office number, nothing. Cell phone, nothing. Call the third person, office, nothing. Cell phone, ring, and then it went to voicemail. So they are convinced this is fake. They're yelling at me, this isn't fake, this isn't real, this isn't a real letter, I would know about this. And then they actually made like photocopies and gave them to the police, and the police are also on the phone. They're also trying to figure out what they would bring me in for, because I heard them talking. They're like, well, I don't technically know what he did illegally. Like, he was in here talking about conspiracy theories, but there's no law against talking about conspiracy theories in a bank. But they were still going to bring me down for more questioning. And so it just so happened that I had done a wireless pen test for the same company. And for the wireless pen test, I had actually gotten the cell phone number for the IT staff, just in case I accidentally took down the wireless network. So I call him up. I'm like, hey, this is not a drill. I'm surrounded. At this point, there's 6 cops around me and a sheriff. I need some help. Nobody's answering their phone. And he goes, well, didn't you know that entire department takes off Fridays? They don't work today. Oh, and the cell phone numbers they gave us, which were their work cell phones, they also turned off. So he's like, hey, hold on, I can work this out. Like, I know you're here doing the pen test. I know that this is all part of the test. Just hold on, I'll get you out of this. And finally, about an hour and a half later, because he calls the bank branch, and the bank branch says to him, how do I know that you're not with these criminals that are breaking in here? And he's like, that's actually a good point. You can look me up on the directory, give me a call back using our internal directory number. So they finally called him back. He called security. Oh, and we were testing the actual head of security was on like the list of people to test. So head of security did not know this was happening. So when they first called security, he goes, no, I don't know of any tests, take them in, and hung up. And so it took about an hour and a half to finally explain everything and say, no, you are all part of this test. This is an actual thing. You can let him go. At which point there was some blowback, and the bank manager apparently threatened to quit after that. She's like, this is the most unprofessional thing I've ever seen in my entire life. But like in my head, I'm like, we did this same pretext at another location, and they handled it well. Like they quietly got me out of the building without making a scene. They didn't grab my things and wave them and yell in the lobby. They didn't call the police. They actually, as soon as I left that building at the other location where I did the same pretext, they immediately called their security headquarters and said, hey, we don't know if this is a security incident, but something weird just happened, and reported it, just like they should have. But yeah, the other location freaked out, called the police, wanted me arrested, wanted me booked. Yeah, eventually got out of it. But yeah, after that, it's like, okay, need to make sure that the department that orders the test works every day that there is the test, because I even sent them a text message and an email, because before I even enter the building, I need to let them know, like, hey, I'm on site, I'm here doing work. They just didn't respond to my text message, but it was the last location. So I was like, hey, I want to get this done and out of the way so I can go home for the weekend. So yeah, almost got arrested for a test that I was authorized to do, because they didn't believe me that I was authorized to do it.
You know, speaking of authorization, Rob, we had talked about it. And I believe it was 2 pen testers that were detained in Iowa. Ray's shaking.
Yeah.
Head.
Yeah, we have you know, in the past I've run into similar situations, not that bad, right? Where the people ordering the test don't have the authorization or to do so, or even if they think they do.
I probably shouldn't say the name of the business either. So
it's okay.
That might be taken out. You know, the 2 pen testers that were detained in Iowa.
Yeah. The thing that I ran into something very similar to what those pen testers in Iowa did, right? But I didn't get arrested or detained. With that incident, it just caused a lot of blowback and friction between my organization and their organization, because the individual who ordered the physical security pen test didn't have authorization to do so, even though they thought they did. So we take special precautions now to ensure that the person has proper authorization. Brian or Ray, do you have any insight into some of that? Oh, Ray, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to consider. First off, one of the big ones is building. A lot of corporate buildings aren't even solely owned by the person who actually is there. Or if the only occupant is the business you're testing, the people who own the building and potentially even the security staff that work there may not even be the same company. And there's all kinds of potential places where, the parking lot is technically managed by another company, but the building isn't. And so you really have to go through and ask all of the questions with the client. And there's going to be ones you miss until the next time. I mean, no one would have thought, well, the head of security, wouldn't be involved here. But clearly there is a good reason for that. And we never really consider those sorts of risks until they come up and happen for the first time to you or to one of your colleagues. And just make notes every time a situation comes up, every time you think of a situation that might come up while on site. Make it part of the regular list of questions to ask during the start. You can't ask too many questions. There is too much risk here to not go through every possible avenue of questioning and dot all your I's and cross all your T's. It was lucky that the testers in Iowa ended up in a cell for a night instead of something worse. And every time we do one of these, there's always that risk.
Paperwork.
Yeah. I didn't think I needed to ask, hey, does the entire department take off Friday, even though that entire department knows I'm also working on Friday?
Yeah.
Now I know. Yeah.
Overnight stuff too. Mm-hmm. If we're going to do a breach overnight, I always check, like, hey, we're going to be breaching at 2 a.m. I'm going to call you. If we don't if you don't pick up the phone and answer me, we're not going inside the building. Are you going to be awake at this time? What's all the numbers? And get at least 2 or 3 backups just in case.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Ray, about owning the building. I did a physical and the greater New York area recently, where they rented or leased wings in giant corporate complexes, right? Where we weren't allowed to breach the outside of the building because they didn't own any of the exterior stuff, right? But we could breach their interior to their doors. And so it's very, we had to have that good delineation, because had we breached the outside, right, and not got a PIN code to let us in to, we had to get a PIN code to get into the building so we could get to their area, we would have, potentially been breaking the law. So having that good scoping document and knowing what you can and cannot break into is very important. Something similar happened in Atlanta, where another client of ours leased a giant refrigerated and freezer warehouse, and everything we pointed out, they're like, yeah, we can't fix, it's the property owner's responsibility. So we have to go through and get pictures and do work and help them point out and tell them exactly what needs to be fixed. They had to create work orders to submit to the property management company to do that. So it was quite an interesting one, because that's when we just walked up to the back door and opened up a freezer door and walked right in, because they didn't have the back door latch installed. Fun stuff.
Yeah. Actually, something that I wanted to bring up real quick, because oftentimes we talk about, oh, the client needs to do this, and they need to do X, Y, and Z, and we need to check all this. I've actually run into the issue of an issue with pen testers themselves, where nobody that I'd worked with, but it was a client where I was doing a scoping call, and they're like, well, how much damage are you guys actually going to cause? Because the last time we hired a company to do a physical pen test, they cost about $25,000 in damages. And we're just like, I don't understand that question. Could you explain? And these physical pen testers had the mindset of they need to win no matter the cost. They couldn't, their egos could not stand it if they did not get into the building. So they just took bolt cutters and started going around and cutting locks. They cut through 6 fences. They physically damaged an alarm panel. And I was just like, yeah, we would never do that. Like, because the point of these tests is to figure out the weaknesses in the layout of the physical landscape and how that can be taken advantage by a bad guy. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to be like, oh yeah, you can cut through a fence. Like I can just point to the fence and be like, you can cut through that. You don't need to pay $50,000 for a pen test to know that somebody can cut through a fence. That's just a known factor. So yeah, I had a client tell me that one time, and at DEF CON, I was a volunteer at the Physical Security Village, which I'm hoping to be a volunteer again at this year. So if anybody is at DEF CON, you can find me there. And I talked to somebody else who, in air quotes, was a physical penetration tester. Not really sure if they were or not, because I was talking to them about some of the different tools and some of the new things that we had created to bypass different security features. And this guy kept coming back to just cutting fences and breaking windows. And I'm like, you are not a industry professional if you are doing those actions. So yeah, I mean, the clients need to make sure that they have their ducks in a row and have the proper letter of authorization when we are doing our professional work. But also, yeah, some penetration testers apparently can't, they can't stand losing to the point of physically damaging the client's property.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because when we do network pen testing, I scope with the clients too. It's like, well, how many machines are you going to bring down? What? My goal is to never bring down machines on an internal network penetration test or on a red team, right? So it's all about hiring reputable, trustworthy people to come in and do that work, so that you know that they're not going to, go in and bring down, machines or throw a brick through a window and say, I got in, right? That's important. Thank you for bringing that up, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
Brian,
I
a little
think-
bit off topic. I know you said you've been doing the locks as your fidget spinners and the such. What's your
Yeah.
favorite?
Favorite locker?
Oh, yeah, favorite lock.
Let's see. I have 3 boxes of locks. I only have one of them with me. Oh, also all my conference stickers are on it. But I guess what I really like is here we go. Master number 3. So this is actually a real nice, easy one to start with, and it has a nice little pop when you get it open. And it's one of the first ones that you should graduate to once you get the feel for the introduction lock. So if you want to work your way up, tool, the Open Organization of Lock Sport, they have a basic set of locks that starts with 1 pin, then 2 pins, then all the way up to 6 pins. And then I probably can't get this now that I'm on camera because I'm nervous. But these number 3, this is like the easiest one to kind of start with, that I like to do just because they're fun, they're easy. It should take about a minute. But yeah, I do not recommend these. There's these clear locks, but they're not well made. They don't really represent what you're ever going to run into in the real world. And even though they're clear, they're still a little bit tricky to actually see and what's really going on. And if you do have the money, you can buy one of these specialty cutout ones. These actually are more expensive though. They run about $60 to $80 online. But yeah, Master Lock number 3, fun, easy intro one. And then there's a lock picking subreddit, and they actually have belt rankings. So you can start at your green belt, then your yellow belt, and work up just like karate belts. And they will actually tell you like the easy to medium to hard to this one's going to take you 3 hours to pick. So you can actually progress through the belt ranking.
That is amazing. 3 hours to pick one lock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I have a follow-on question, and I will say this: I have never had to pick a lock on a physical test because I just bypass all those doors or locking mechanisms. You okay?
Sorry, I dropped my picks on the ground when I was showing them.
How many? How often do you pick locks on physical assessments? I count on one hand how many times I've done.
Yeah, same here. I think there was just one location where when I finally showed up and did the on-site reconnaissance, I looked at the lock as a big copper lock, which is or brass lock, sorry, which is great for having long-term weatherproof locks. But I looked at it and I just go, oh my God, that's a green belt lock. I should be able to get that in under a minute. So like I had to. And then like I had my coworker take a video of it for the report, and somehow I got super lucky, and I literally like inserted my picks, and then the thing just popped open in 15 seconds. So yeah, I think in total it's been 4. I picked 4 locks for all the physical pen tests that I've done. There's usually not a point. There's too many other ways to get in.
So you went Hollywood then with that one then, huh?
Yeah.
15 second.
Yep.
Yeah, 2 things I know are Hollywood: lock picking and hacking firewalls.
Hacking firewalls, yes. Especially Palo Alto firewalls. Hacking, yeah.
I hacked the firewall in 15 seconds. I need 25 more seconds. 25 more seconds and I'll get this firewall. Like, what? What is this?
Yeah, I think I've picked a single door lock on a physical, but I have picked a pretty significant number of like file cabinet drawers and things like
Those
that.
don't count.
The real simple stuff. But I don't pick locks for doors. I just pop the small stuff if I really get in someplace and I want to dig around and find data or interesting things for myself.
Is it really picking a lock when you just pick all the pins above the shear line and turn the tumbler? Because that's basically what you're doing at that point in time.
That are challenged like me, yes. Thank you very much. And I too do not want to be abducted by aliens.
Well, I think. Go ahead, Ray.
I was just say there's a lot of stuff that I think a lot of people should learn as part of learning how to do a physical, or at least preparing for a physical, like de-escalation training. But lockpicking is probably not anywhere near the top of that list.
Hold on, I'll be back. I'll go get you the tool I use most during physical penetration testing.
We're going to be here.
Oh,
It's going to be duct tape.
Right. Yeah. All right.
I think I know what he's going for. I think, but I don't know, because the interesting thing is that with physical pen testing, oftentimes there's a series of like 5 tools that will get you into 95% of the place. Oh yes, I was right. Canned air. I don't know if you're going for that, if you're going to go for an underdoor tool, but I figured the canned air would be yeah, it's going to be up there.
Canned air. Get those motion and temperature sensors triggered.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell us how it works.
Disposable pocket warmers.
That's good. So ADA, and fire code has these, magnet locks on the door. So if someone's coming, it automatically unlocks for them. Or I forget what's regulation. Brian could tell you why they have those. But they used to be motion sensors. So whenever it sensed motion, it would trigger to unlock the magnet, right? So you could just pull the door open. But they changed to temperature changing. So since shift in temperature, and what you do is you put the straw on the door or wherever, and you just trigger that, and you see how that's cold coming out there, and that's enough temperature change to trigger that sensor so you can pull the door open from the outside, because it disconnects the magnet, thinking that someone's walking in the inside. I mean, my number one physical penetration testing tool, dust off.
Ray, you had mentioned pocket warmers as well.
Yeah, same concept. Disposable pocket warmers work really well for generating a heat difference. I remember one of my favorites was had a painting on a wall, had a pocket warmer, a painting on the wall, and we just used that to heat up the painting and slid it right under a door. That was it.
Cell phones. If you get your cell phones warm enough and you slide it underneath the door far enough, and it will actually trigger that as well. And so I've actually gotten into some pretty big companies with sliding my cell phone underneath the door, because ran out of compressed air because I used it all trying to get to that point or whatever. But yeah.
So have you ever lost your phone? Like you had to pick the lock, maybe? Because it seems kind of risky if you slide your phone in and you're betting on it. So it's like 100% thing.
No, there's other ways, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that, like, I only do that if I'm certain. Right? I think we did it once with a manila envelope on the old-fashioned sensors, if they're motion, not temperature gauge. If they have you can tell it's like an aged one. You can tell it's not new. You can slide a manila envelope or a piece of paper under the door, trigger it as well. But the cool thing with compressed air is it creates movement too, so it'll trigger motion and temperature. That's why number one tool.
So that bodes the question: how much time and effort do you spend on these before you say, "Yeah, I'm done"?
Seconds, minutes.
Yeah.
Not long. If you can't get in that door, there's another door you could get into, guaranteed. You don't want to spend too much time at that breach point. Less than 5 minutes. If you're there after 5 minutes, you're there too long. Go on to the next plan.
So if there's one thing that Brian and Ray, if you could offer a piece of advice to employers, like people that are actually hiring you for this physical penetration test, what would you say that, like, the number one thing that you would run across that's so common, that's like, here we go again. You see it from time after time after time.
Ray, you want to go first? I'm still thinking on this one.
I have an answer. I have a two-parter, but I'll let these guys answer first.
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you could do. I think if I want to hire someone, the one thing that I want to make sure that they've got is the ability to communicate well. Because if you can actually talk through with the client, with the security guard who catches you, person you have to social engineer, or whatever, you're more likely to get out of the situation okay and probably successful. And I can teach all of the physical penetration testing tips and tricks and how to bypass doors or pick a lock or do recon properly or whatever, but it's a lot harder to teach someone how to communicate with somebody. And if I could, and I'd say that applies to all of pen testing, someone who can communicate and learn is way more important than knowing the skills themselves.
Yeah. And I guess one of the hard things for companies to secure against is just the fact that there's unintended consequences sometimes of the architecture and where you put doors in a building, and also that just over time the doors shift, and what was once a properly fitting door a year and a half later can have a gap on the bottom that will give me everything that I need to get into that building. And really one of the best ways to protect against this is that if you find somebody internal to the organization that likes this stuff, like find somebody that enjoys lockpicking or just has a knack for this, and emboldening them so that they can feel comfortable going around and being like, oh yeah, I really like this stuff. I watched this YouTube video about how they used an under the door tool, and giving that employee permission to go around and see and find the weaknesses themselves before you have to pay $30,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 for a pen test, for a physical pen test, which are usually more expensive because of the added risk. I can save you lots of money and get you good employee retention because you're allowing them to do something they like. In fact, one time during the pandemic, there was a company that was doing a lot of remodeling because at the time, hey, everybody's out of the offices, perfect time to remodel. But before they had everybody else move back in, they said, hey, we want to make sure that everything is secure. And so it was myself, another physical pen tester, and we walked around with what started with just one IT staff person, and we showed them how to do the credit card trick to get into the server room. And then next thing we know is there's about 5 IT people with us, and we're just going around the entire building saying, hey, this door is weak, here's the tool, you guys go have some fun and break into your own office and see who can do it. And it ended up being an unofficial team building exercise for their IT staff, where we took them around to different areas of their building and taught them how to break into their own building and then how to secure it. So that was actually a lot of fun.
Mine is a little differently. It's an approach thing. When you're talking to people, you want to hire companies to come in, right? Not all organizations are a good fit for a physical penetration test, right? And so ask those questions. Do you have other service offerings? Like, can you do a walkthrough? And just try to walk through other services and see how they talk about themselves. Do they give you a reference? And if those references, great, talk to them. But ask them questions about, well, what lessons have you learned the hard way? Or, just ask them to talk about themselves in a way, because as Brian said earlier, there are some amazing companies out there that do this. We know this. There's also some not so amazing companies who do this that end up giving the rest of the industry a bad name. And the goal there is to try to weed those people out, right? So what lessons have you learned as an organization is a great question to ask the organization, as well as the references, but ask about other service offerings and see how they talk about themselves. Everybody wants to say, yes, we're the best, we're great. But there's a fine line between confidence and a bad ego, right? And trying to figure out if they have that line as a company. Because we know that people with bad egos are not going to be effective communicators, right? And the most important thing here is securing the client, not another notch on that person's belt.
Yeah, the victory condition isn't the break-in; it's the client getting more secure. It's the client getting the value out of the engagement.
Correct. There's a lot of people out there that do this for the notches on their belt, right? You want to make sure that they actually want to be your trusted, I hate to say it. I hate to say this. Ray knows what I'm about to say. A trusted security partner, right? I don't like saying that very much, but we the people that you bring in, you totally want to be able to be, you want to trust them that they have your best interest in mind, and you kind of have to weed through that. That's what I was getting at. Sorry, that was a little bit longer.
No. Well, I appreciate everyone, taking time out of your, it's late. Brian, it's late for you. Ray, it's great seeing you. I appreciate Rob showing up. Kind of doing a lot of, the heavy lifting on the back end organization of this. And this is our first video podcast. We had a little bit of technical problems right at the beginning, but we figured it out. Just don't know what that was all about. My background is not even loading. But, as we go along, this is episode 1 of 12, I think, that we've done prior. And I hope to have both of you back, all 3 of you back at some point. I know Rob will be back, of course, and Ray, you're invited. Brian, so are you. And but I appreciate it.
Are we going to do an unhealthy plug for DEF CON this year or what?
Yeah, so Brian is going to try to volunteer at
Physical Security Village. Yeah.
And I will be thinking possibly I might be there in person running the Kubernetes Capture the Flag in person. Maybe, possibly. I'll keep all my socials and I'll let everyone here know if I'm going to be there. But if you are there and there's a Kubernetes Capture the Flag, go up to, I think it's going to be in the Walla Sheep Village. Come up and say hi. I'll be there.
Sweet.
This podcast does not reflect the opinions of Clover Park Technical College. Thanks for listening. Take care, y'all.